Uh, what chapter? What chapter was that? Let me go to the bottom. What's nice about some of these, though, the notes. I mean, seriously, lots of notes. Anyway, where was that? Euhemerus and others. To our forefathers, a few centuries ago, the history of Ireland appeared to be known, at least in outline, continuous from a couple of thousand years BC down to their own time. Nowadays, we are naturally more skeptical. Before we can give credence to precise statements regarding events in remote times, we have to assure ourselves that these statements are based on contemporary or nearly contemporary records. The critical evaluation of the sources of our knowledge of pre-Christian Ireland is of recent growth. About the middle of the last century, those two great contemporary scholars, O'Donovan and Curry, still had utmost abounded confidence in the historical accuracy of most of the records relating to pre-Christian times. Thus, O'Donovan's opinion that Tuatha Dé Danann were real people. History is so much wrapped up in fable and obscurity. Folk version of the myth and the birth of Lugh, which he regards as evidently founded on facts, while conceding that the facts have been much distorted. Curry seems to have accepted without question the history of Ireland as related in Leburgburn and elsewhere, at least in time of Milesian invasion onwards. Even the story of the Second Battle of Maggiore, in which the mythical Tuatha Dé Danann vanished, the no less mythical Fomor, he is inclined to regard as veracious. Euhemerism, that is, the treating of divine beings as if they were men of a far-off age, has long been a favorite method of manufacturing early history in Ireland and elsewhere. Our Irish pseudo-historians were, through Euhemerists. So too were the inventors of pre-Christian parts of our genealogies, by thus humanizing and immortalizing the divinities of pagan Ireland. They hoped to eradicate the pagan beliefs that still lingered on among the countrymen. So they navigated the Isle of Man and Dallas. They were counting the deaths of all the leading members of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Doubtless his intention was to emphasize their mortal nature, for he must have been well aware that many of the personages he mentions were really pagan deities. And it gets better. The history of pre-Christian Ireland, as related in the Burger seems to have imposed itself easily on our ancestors. In the course of time, the increasing antiquity of the record only strengthened its authority. In the late 17th century, it was accepted unquestionable as historical truth. By scholars like the Four Masters, Keating, de McFergus. Despite its general spurious character, Wargrave embodies some popular traditions concerning the Goetic invasion and the names of pre-Goetic inhabitants. One section of it that relating to the Tuatha Dé Danann owes its origin to the desire to reduce the deities of pagan Ireland to the level of mortal man. This part of the myth into treating the whole work as a methodological compilation, a kind of Irish theogony, into which we read the struggles of the gods of life and light against the gods of death and night. Actually, the Borgia is no more a mythological treatise than it is an historical one. While no one nowadays would accept all the fictions of the Borg about its influence and opinion is by no means exhausted. The biggest fiction the authors of Bulgarian fiction is a necessary long series of fabrications to support it. And he goes on. I love it. It gets better. But that was I mean, early Irish history and mythology. That's what this is. 1946, I think. Yeah. Well, enough of that. That's not even what I want. That's putting that up. I had to find something else. Put that up. Is this what we've done? It was Keating. These three erudite linguists first invented the alphabet in three principal languages, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, which they inscribed upon tables of wood. And it petrified. Well, that was a joke, as to learn who written the time of St. Columbus. It was Phineas Farsa. Our historians inform us that he was called Ghetto, or Ghetto, from the Irish word Galsdale, which signifies a lover of learning. For learning in English, in the Irish language is Gael, and love is the English for the word deal. Grecian philosophers explained the word in the same manner, and by God's did it mean of lover of learning. It's not observed in the Irish chronicles that Phineas Farsa had any more children than two sons, and who is the eldest, and now the younger brother. As the old poet remarks, oh, it's the poem. The account of the travels of Nero from Scotia into Egypt, and of his adventures till his death. Thus young Prince has employed himself at the time with great applause in educating the Scythian youth, insomuch that the fame of his learning and accomplishments was carried into distant countries, till at length it reached the ears of Pharaoh Sanguirus, king of Egypt. This monarch was so charmed with the report that he had learned that he immediately dispatched messengers into Scythia to invite Noah into Egypt and instruct the youth of that country. As the poet mentions in these lines, the Egyptian monarch heard of Noah's fame from distant Scythia and admired his learning. Noah accepted of the invitation, and when he had in Egypt a small time, the king, delighted with his learning and the modesty of his behavior, bestowed upon him his daughter Skoda. Now, would Skoda be known as a king's name? By her name? A princess of great beauty, and gave him lands of perfect that lie upon the coast of the Red Sea. This is universally allowed by our chronicles and observed by the poet in his poem, which begins, got a glass, obtain cloud. The Scythian soon compiled with the request, but when he came, soft love his heart possessed, and for reward he was with charming Skoda blessed. It was the daughter of Pharaoh. What was that? It was like, it wasn't sangria, it was sinners. Egyptian, remember. Singers. After his marriage with the princess, he erected schools and seminaries of learning in her and taught the science of the universal language to the youth of Egypt. This time his wife Skoda was delivered of a son, whom by the command of Noah was called Gadalus. That is, Gadalus. Oh, that guy Glass. The old Glass. It may seem strange, perhaps, that Noah, who was the fifth descendant from Japheth, should be contemporary with Moses, especially considering that it was a space of 997 years, according to this book, from the deluge till Moses took upon the command of the Israelites. This is Irish history. This difficulty will be answered if we observe. Where's he getting this? That it is not impossible for Noah to live some 100 years. Those ages of the world lived mankind very long. It'll be proved by the testimony of Scripture. Hebrew, son of Seth, the fourth descendant of Shem, lived 464 years, and Shem himself lived 500 years after his son Arphaxad was born. Arphaxad. Oh, we're going to get down and knocking. Akhenaten, as the account we fill in the 11th chapter of the book of Genesis. So we're much to admire now should live from the 42nd year. 42nd year of the reign of Nan, the son of Peles, to the time of Moses came into Egypt. Moses. What's neat that Moses' sister must have been a lot older, because it seemed like she was there, or at least a little older, to recommend a nurse. And the wonder abates still if we give credit to Emeritus Scotus, who says, and that, I knew something was wrong. I found out there's different names. It's like Julius. It's like Caesar. And then we find out that Caesar, or now which Caesar? So this Caesar name lives on to other people. There's probably Augustus's. There's not, many. It's got the great by their name, but there are. I mean, when you think about it. Now, Napoleon, that kind of stands out. But then we read that even towns, they change names and stay the same name. And then transfer names and move somewhere else with the same name. When the people migrate. And then sometimes they just change name. When new people move in, they change names to something, and they're just known as those people's names. And then we get the calendars. And you read these people, Herodotus. They say they went, and you find out they're doing calendars. And you find out this guy lived he reigned 400 years. And he took the throne, he was 6 years old. And you find out what? And this guy's like a young guy. And you're like, what? And you find out, and then they're having festivals to celebrate. What are they going on? Then you find out he's the king of the lesser, lower Egypt. He's just king down there, and they're celebrating these festivals all the time. So what? He's reigned 400 years. You find out, well, years and years, and they're calculating the years by the months, by the moon, so 28 days or so. And they're like, oh, so and you got these people trying to explain it to us like, hey, they're doing that. So they got their own schedule going on. Then we find out their schedule going on quick. They're partying all the time. All these moon festivals going on. They're celebrating the kings of Egypt every month, man. And you got crazy times, and they're reading down there, and you try to look on the outside and add this stuff together, and it's 100 years here and 100 years there, and he reigned 400 years, and he reigned 400 years, and wait, what? And that 400 years was really like a 30-year reign maybe, but I mean, what's going on? And then we read things change names. Oh, and history. I wasn't even going to go there. 500 years after the son Arphaxad was born. This account we find in the 11th chapter of the book of Genesis, so that we are not so much to admire that Noah should live from the 42nd year of the reign of Nine, the son of Peleg, to the time of Moses and El. And then we try to figure out these times. And then we even find out that they're reading, and they got one calendar, got another calendar. And then we find out even recent time. Why the heck would Caesar, like, he would, it says like he would begin the calendar by the completion of a temple. So it must have not been off but like 4 or 5 days. But if you're measuring by months anyway, who cares if you're going by some other timeline? And they did. Some of them did. That's what they say. So the times and trying to add this up and then going, and then usher. I like some of it and some of it. And then you got people adding on years. And then even in some chronicles, they'll be like saying something happened and you figure it out and it's like 1300. And another book says it's 1000. It's only 300 years off. And sometimes it's only 500 years off. But sometimes it's way off. I mean, have people run like some thousands of years. Because they're measuring in months. And, and the wonder abates still, if we may give credit to Marianus Scotus, who says that it was 331 years after the flood when the confusion of languages happened at the Tower of Babel. And we have the evidence of the most authentic records to prove that Noah was born a considerable time after that confusion, so that the age of this prince is not at all incredible, nor is the testimony of Scottish author invalid, who places now contemporary with Moses. During the time Noah resided in Capernaum near the Red Sea with his wife Scotus and Gedaliah his son. The children of Israel, under the conduct of Moses and Aaron, attempted to free themselves from the slavery of Egypt and encamped near Capernaum. Somewhat surprised at the number of those itinerants who had fixed themselves in his neighborhood, went himself in person to make discoveries and to know their business and what nation they belonged. When he came to the outside of the camp, he met Aaron, of whom he inquired the reason of their encampment and the country they were of. Aaron very courteously gave him satisfaction in beginning the history of the Hebrew nation, relating the adventures of the people, and informed him of the bondage they had endured many years under the taskmasters of the Egyptian king, and how a God they worshipped had worked wonders and miracles in their deliverance, and had punished the most dreadful judgments. He relayed. Well, he knew that story. That had been something he had been taught. Effective that relation immediately after friendship and service of Aaron. And maybe even had relatives go through it, service of Aaron, and asked whether he had sufficient provision for so numerous of people in distress. Promised to furnish them with corn and other necessities, and wine, I hope, and wine. The history of the Israel. Am I finding wine? Repeated the conversation that happened same night. The young prince Gedaliah, the son of Noah, had the misfortune to be bit neck by a serpent. Some say he was swimming in a river, and through others assert the serpent came out of adjacent wilderness and bit him in the bed. His venom instantly spread itself through his veins and poisoned the whole mass of his blood. He was Prince languished and reduced to the very brink of his death. A dreadful accident alarmed Neil and his people. That was his boy, I guess. That was his offspring. Resolved to carry the expired prince to the camp of the Hebrews and treat the humanity of Moses that would pray the recovery of the Almighty God. Oh, did he have the snake with him? And he was known from Egypt as Asclepius, in so wonderful a manner among the Egyptians. Oh. Moses complied with the request and addressed himself fervently to God and saved the young prince, laying his rod that was on his hand and on the youth immediately recovered, was perfectly healed, and remained a green spot upon the place where the bite was. From the green spot the prince afterwards was called Glass, but by modern authors, Gedalius. Glass signifies green. Ghetto. Oh, it's Irish green, and the moderns corruptly pronounce it, though Ghetto was the proper name. Being joined with it is the reason that he generally called Gedalius, and from Ghetto, or Gedalius. And then that's the place that changed name, the Gadarenes. So you got the Gadarenes, and you find out that the Gadarenes, Gedalius, which was was the Decapolis, which then was, after an invasion, it was changed to Scythopolis. To say the posterity of Gedalius. When Moses had miraculously cured the bite of the serpent, he prophesied that wherever the young prince and his posterity should inhabit, the country should never be infested of any venomous creature. It says it's fulfilled in the island of Crete. So what did I say? And I guess St. Patrick brought in the snakes. Is that what it said? I've inserted the following verses extracted from the royal records of Tara. The hissing serpent, eager of his prey, ascends the couch where sleeping Gada lay. In winding mazes then himself he rolled, and leaped upon him in a dreadful fold. All shook his forked tongue, and then around his neck he twist, and gives a deadly wound. From his black gums he pressed the killer's vein, and from his mouth a blastering vapor is come. The subtle poison spreads through every vein. No art, no juice of herbs can ease the pain, till Moses with his never-failing wand touched the raw wound and healed at his command. But a green spot the tender skin disdained. From hence the princely youth received his name, and he was called Glass. Other antiquaries are of the opinion that he was called Glass of his armor, the shining of the weapons he used in the wars, as the poet observes. This prince, the virtuous Scoda here, from the bright history of the arms he wore, called Glass. So I guess he had been in a war or something, or was ready to go to war. Some of the Irish chronicles insert the reason why Scoda, the mother of Gallus, was called by his father of Gedalius, descended from the Scythian race, of whom was accustomed to call the women after their husbands' names. It is to be observed that the princess was a different person from that Scoda. It is to be observed that this princess was a different person from that Scoda, who was the wife of Willem towards afterwards called Melissus, king of Spain, by whom he had 6 sons. For the father of Scoda, the mother of Gedalius, was Pharaoh's Cindrus, king of Egypt, who pursued the children of Israel as they fled from slavery and perished in the Red Sea with all his army, or the father of that Scots.
who was the wife of Melesias, king of Spain, was the 15th king of Egypt in succession from the pharaohs above mentioned, and distinguished by the name of Pharaoh.
While now had received the prince, his son, perfect health, by the prayers of Moses, in return to supply the Israel provisions, was necessary for the journey, he began the emphasis that his father-in-law displeased the civil he showed the people. And you would think I wouldn't read. This motion Nil compiled with, and according to Moses, dispatched 1,000 men well armed and made themselves masters of the ships, delivered them into possession. Mill, who with all plausible possible speed went on board with all his people and stood out to sea in expectation of the event. Upon the next days the waters of the Red Sea were divided, and a wonderful passage made by the Israelites to go through. And Pharaoh, with the choicest forces of his kingdom, attempted to follow them, were all drowned. Upon the memorial transaction, an old poet has these lines: the haughty monarch, with the hearts elate, resolved to follow and to tempt his fate. He rushed into the deep, the waters close, and with impetuous rage his pride opposed. They cover all his host, and in their course swept away 60,000 foot and 50,000 horse. Gedalius, after the decease of his father, took upon him command and admitted his mother Scota to share the government. This overthrow of the Egyptians was brought to pass 797 years after the deluge. Gedalius had a son born him in Egypt, whom he named Isru. He was the father of Sarah, who possessed and ruled over territory by his ancestors. And that's another thing. They'd have a king here and a king here. And even if something was split into north and south, then they had all kind of, just look at North America. Yeah, there's 50 of them, and then they broke up into all them other ones in there too. And then there's all them little ones in there too. An account of the exposition of the posterity of Noah and his people out of Egypt by Pharaoh. I'm just now getting there. Pharaoh Artur, upon his accession to the crown of Egypt, immediately set himself to repair a loss sustained in the last reign, and raised a numerous army, with design of revenge upon the posterity of Nil and Gedalius, for seizing the shipment and assisting the Israelites, which provisions which they encamped at the borders of the Red Sea. And when he had completed his forces, he marched towards the country of Capernaum and entered it with fire and sword. Bushingham, in his book called, there it is, it's nice when you get a book name, Hypodigmn, gives the same account where he says the Egyptian being overwhelmed by the Red Sea, those that remained drove out the Scythian prince who resided among them, lest he should take advantage of the weakness of the government and make an attempt upon the crown. When he was expelled the country with his followers, he came to Spain, where he and his people lived many years, and became numerous. And from thence they came into Ireland. We are to observe that the Scythian prince was Shu, the son of Eresu, son of Gallus, and not Gedalius himself, as Hypodigmn and some ignorant English writers that followed him take the freedom to assert. But such pretenders of history is to be no authority when compared to the testimony of Irish chronicles, which affirm positively that Gedalius was the son of Skoda, the daughter of Pharaoh Sindris, king of Egypt, that he remained there his lifetime and there died. We are informed by the same records that this prince never came out of Greece, as others imagine, but his father, who was Neil, the son of Phoenicia, Pharsa, came directly from Scythia. Nor is the account of Wasillium to be wholly credited, for this shrew, upon the expulsion from Egypt, did not direct his course towards Spain, but arrived in Scythia, and it was Daga, the son of Bratha, the 15th descendant from Su, that came first into Spain. So you got Egyptian mercenary coming in. It was Daga, the son of Bratha, the 15th descendant from Su, that came first into Spain. As the antiquaries of Ireland inform us, however, it is certain that Shrew was the commander, prince of the Gedalians. In their voyage from Egypt, when they were driven out by Pharaoh and Shur. This is confirmed by the authority of Galban, a celebrated poet, who wrote a poem upon the subject while he was at sea, and has these verses. Shrew, son of Ishu, son of Gallus, the founder of the great Gadalian race, left the Egyptian shore, expelled by force, and sailed with 4 ships. He had in every transport 25 nobles of the chiefest rank, attended by their virtuous ladies. The Irish records of best authorities agree that Gedalius and his Ishu lived in and died in Egypt, and that Shrew, the son of Ishu, son of Gedalius, was the commander of the Gedalians in this expedition. He landed with his fathers in the island of Crete, where he died, and was succeeded in the government by Eber, or Heber Scott, his son, who was the head of that people, and sailed with them from Crete, and brought them to Scythia. There's an author of some note who is of opinion that the Irish and Scots were generally called Scots for the Hebrew Scot, and were sailed for the Gedalians of Crete to Scythia, because the word Scot signifies a soldier, a man of valor, and a certain, and the prince is a person of great bravery, isn't that? So you're going to preach his ethics on me now? You're going to preach his nationality on me? And the arrows of the wonders of the hunters and the ancestors. And the ancestors, the Irish chronicles, and the Gedalians in general were called Scots because they originally came out of Scythia. Gedalius was a contemporary with Moses and was 80 years old when Pharaoh and his army were destroyed in the Red Sea.